Hi everyone. Tonight, we step quietly into the cold, stony heart of a medieval fortress, where your tired boots scrape across uneven flagstones worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. The torches along the walls flicker, and even though they burn steadily, the chill seems to push through cracks in the mortar and between the heavy stones, as if warmth and light were never meant to travel together. You pull your cloak tighter, the air sharp enough to sting your nose and cloud your breath. It's bedtime in a castle with more drafts than doorways, and you're about to learn how knights, those armored warriors who spent their days charging across muddy fields, actually managed to rest when winter dug its claws into the night. With your modern expectations of heating, you probably won't last long. Still, you're going to give it a try. Before you settle in, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy this content. And tell me, where are you listening from, and what time is it as you drift off tonight? Now dim the lights. The stone chamber around you carries the faint smell of soot, dampness, and traces of old hay stuck to someone's boots. No matter how impressive the fortress appears from the outside, towers rising into the night sky, banners cracking in the wind, the interior feels less like luxury and more like a refrigerated cave. These walls weren't built for comfort. Their thickness kept enemies out, but also locked in the cold, turning rooms into echo chambers for rattling drafts. You sit on the edge of a rough wooden bed, feeling the chill climb through the soles of your feet. A quick historical reminder: castles in northern Europe sometimes dropped below freezing inside the very rooms where nobles slept. Archaeological studies of drafty great halls reveal just how little insulation existed. Those heavy stone walls didn't hold warmth, they stored cold, almost like a vault. No wonder written records mention constant fires and layer upon layer of clothing, even indoors. Yet people still viewed castles as symbols of status. Strange, isn't it, that luxury sometimes meant freezing in style rather than sweating comfortably inside a cottage near a warm hearth? You shift on the straw-filled mattress, hearing a faint drip of water somewhere down the corridor. It's easy to imagine that drop turning into a tiny icicle before morning. Here's a quirky detail. Some chroniclers noted that lords kept barrels of wine near their beds, not just for drinking, but to prevent the liquid from freezing in storage rooms. Imagine settling in for the night knowing that if your wine stayed liquid, you had won a small victory. If it froze, well, time to reconsider your insulation. The soundscape of your chamber isn't silent. It's restless. Wind squeezes through the narrow arrow slits, humming like a forgotten choir practicing off-key. The rushes scattered across the floor crunch under your boots. Somewhere, a rat rustles, every creature here searching for warmth. You pull your cloak higher until it scratches your chin, shoulders hunched. You're a knight without armor tonight, bracing not for battle but for the cold. Still, despite the discomfort, there's a quiet sense of safety. You're alive, sheltered beneath stone walls, protected from wolves howling outside. The fire in the great hall still glows faintly, though you feel none of its heat here. A servant's distant footsteps echo somewhere below. This is where the nightly routine begins, a battle fought with wool, fur, and determination against a climate with no mercy. Historians still debate whether medieval people truly adapted to the cold or simply endured it. Some argue their bodies grew accustomed over time, making icy rooms manageable. Others point to letters and complaints describing endless grievances about drafts, frost, and sleepless nights. Perhaps, like you tonight, they shivered continuously and prayed for dawn. You lie back, letting your head settle into a lumpy pillow. The straw inside rustles, not luxurious feathers, but functional enough. You can feel the moisture from your breath settling into the fabric, making it colder. Close your eyes, and you can almost sense the struggle knights faced. They could confront swords without fear, yet in their own chambers, frost was a quiet, persistent enemy, often more victorious than any foe on the battlefield. The ceiling beams groan under the wind, and you picture snow piling on the roof, its silent weight pressing downward. The night stretches long, like an unwelcome guest refusing to leave. Wrapped tightly in your cloak against the straw mattress, you accept that comfort will never fully arrive. Sleep will come eventually, but only after you stop noticing the ache in your toes or the cloud of your breath hanging in the air. This is your first night within these stone walls, And you already realize that lasting until morning is a challenge of its own. Still lying there, wrapped in your cloak, you understand that survival in such brutal cold depends not only on fire or fur bedding but on the number of layers between your body and the freezing air. Linen, wool, more linen, more wool. It becomes a stacking game of barriers until you feel more like a bundled parcel than a person. Without these layers, you'd be stiff as frozen meat by dawn. The first layer sits close to your skin, a simple linen shift, smooth and washable, meant to absorb sweat and keep the outer garments dry. Over that comes wool, coarse by today's standards but prized for its ability to trap heat. A second tunic is added, perhaps a surcoat, with hose and thick socks if you're fortunate. Some knights kept their boots near their beds, loosening them to avoid cutting circulation. After all, dreaming is difficult when your toes feel like ice. Here's another historical fact. Medieval wool wasn't like the soft merino you know today. It was heavier and denser, often containing natural oils from the sheep's fleece. That lanolin offered some water resistance but also carried a faint earthy, oily scent that clung to every garment. In this chamber, you'd smell it too, blending with smoke and damp stone. To medieval people, that scent meant survival, not discomfort. And here's one more small, amusing detail before you burrow deeper into your blanket. Wealthier knights sometimes wore nightcaps, not just simple hats. Full hoods often had long tails that could be wrapped under the chin like a scarf. One record even describes a nobleman so attached to his hood that he refused to remove it during late-night meetings, leaving others to question whether his devotion was to God, his lord, or simply the wool covering his ears. Picture trying to sleep with your hood tied tight, making you look more like a wrapped vegetable than a warrior. The layers didn't stop at clothing. Wool blankets could be stacked 3 or 4 high. If the household owned finer materials, a linen sheet might be placed between the wool layers, not for warmth, but for comfort. Linen felt smoother on the skin and was much easier to clean. That inner sheet was usually the only one washed frequently, since laundering heavy wool was a difficult and time-consuming task. As you drift towards sleep, you're not just lying under covers, you're practically enclosed in a carefully arranged system of textiles. But scholars still debate how many layers were actually common. Some believe that even poorer knights serving wealthier lords received enough linens and woolens to keep from freezing, since a frozen retainer was hardly useful. Others argue that unless a man was truly wealthy, he managed with a single blanket and the clothes he'd worn all day, relying on endurance to survive the cold. Written records don't offer clarity. Inventories mention bedding but rarely list exact quantities. You're left wondering whether you'd be lucky enough to be wrapped in comfort or shivering under one rough cover. Your fingers slowly warm beneath the layers. The wool may itch, but it also traps the heat your body produces. As you curl tighter, the warmth begins to spread inward, gradually, like embers glowing in your bones. Outside, the wind shakes the shutters, yet you feel a thin boundary between your small warm space and the vast cold surrounding it. It's fragile, like a winter bubble, but it's still there, and for now, that's enough. We often imagine knights as proud figures crossing battlefields in shining armor. But in moments like these, their dignity gave way to a simple reality. Everyone looks a bit foolish buried under countless layers. Picture one of those proud warriors, plume on his helmet during the day, reduced at night to a lumpy heap of wool and linen, snoring under his hood while gripping his blanket like a child. It's oddly reassuring. Even the most respected fighters relied on basic bedtime habits to get through the night. So you sink deeper into the bedding, appreciating every scratch and fold. The night is long and the cold is harsh, but enough layers give you a real chance. Each one is a small sign of human resourcefulness, a reminder that sometimes survival depends not on weapons, but on something as simple as wool wrapped twice around your shoulders. You shift on the straw mattress, the chill still creeping through the gaps, when you notice something interesting. The surface beneath you changed depending on your status. Not everyone slept on the same kind of bed. What marked the difference between a rough night and one that felt almost comfortable was the type of mattress itself. Picture a common soldier falling onto a sack stuffed with straw. It rustles, scratches, and pricks his skin with tiny stalks. The smell is sharp and earthy, almost like a barn. Still, For him, it's better than the frozen ground outside. But if you served in a wealthy household or enjoyed some privilege, you might rest on a feather mattress. Down and quills inside linen covers soften the experience, making it feel more like sinking gently than lying down. That leap, from straw to feathers, was as great as the gap between peasant and noble. Historical records show that feather beds were treasured possessions, often listed in wills beside land and jewelry. A mattress was more than bedding. It signaled status and suggested that nighttime comfort mattered. When nobles traveled, their staff sometimes transported feather mattresses along with other belongings, folded or rolled so they wouldn't have to sleep on common pallets. Imagine attendants carrying huge bundles of bedding across hills while the lord worried about the feathers flattening in damp weather. There's also a humorous side to these accounts. Some medieval writers mocked wealthy sleepers, claiming that soft beds weakened men and left them unprepared for hardship. Comfort, they argued, dulled a warrior's edge. Yet, when frost stiffened every joint, it's easy to understand why even the proudest men preferred a softer rest. Archaeological evidence from old castles reveals traces of bedding, bits of goose down, remains of straw pads, and fragments of rush mats placed under mattresses to protect them from damp floors. This suggests great variation in sleeping setups. Some rooms used simple pallets on the ground, others had raised wooden frames to avoid the cold earth. What you slept on depended on rank, not ability. You might also be surprised by how noisy these beds were. Straw mattresses crackled and shifted with every movement, sounding almost like crumpled paper. Feather beds had their own issues. Without careful stitching, feathers poked through the fabric, pricking the sleeper. Many records mention complaints of quills causing sudden discomfort during the night, turning luxury into frustration. Scholars still disagree about how common feather mattresses were in knights' quarters. Some argue they were reserved for high nobility, leaving most knights with straw. Others point to inventories listing feather beds in more modest households, suggesting the practice was more widespread. The debate continues because surviving documents are inconsistent. One castle might mention dozens of feather mattresses, while another of similar rank lists none. Now picture it again. You settle onto a straw-filled mattress, the scent of dry grass filling the air. It rustles beneath you, firm but uneven. Then consider the alternative, a bed of goose down that yields softly, wrapping you like a cushion of air. The contrast is striking, yet both types existed within the same walls. Still, even the finest mattress couldn't fully overcome the cold. Feather beds provided insulation, but in a freezing chamber with drafts everywhere, warmth still escaped. Heavy blankets and fur throws were essential. A feather mattress wasn't a solution on its own, it was simply another layer in the long struggle against winter. One curious anecdote survives from a French noble's household. He instructed his servants to rotate his feather mattress every 2 weeks, convinced the feathers became tired if pressed the same way for too long. Whether true or imagined, it's easy to picture irritated servants flipping a huge sack of goose down while quietly complaining about their lord's beliefs. Fussy superstitions show how even something as simple as a mattress became wrapped in ritual and habit. And bedding carried meaning far beyond comfort. In medieval life, beds symbolized wealth, inheritance, and status. A knight might earn fame on the battlefield, but his private reputation could be seen in the way he slept. Feather mattresses, silk sheets when available, and embroidered covers were not only for warmth, they signaled a man's position in society. Of course, not all knights cared. Some preferred the plain feel of straw, claiming it kept them tough. But one wonders how many of them secretly wished for feathers after a freezing night ride. You can almost imagine their sighs as they fell onto a prickly straw pallet, muttering, "At least it's something." The scene becomes clearer. You are in your chamber, choosing between two nightly realities. On the straw bed, you fight the cold, itch against the stalks, and shift constantly to find a bearable angle, your body complaining with every move. On the feather mattress, you sink into softness, the quiet rustle of feathers surrounding you, held in comfort but still feeling the cold air seeping through the curtains. Either way, the night stretches ahead. Outside, wind beats against the walls, shutters rattle, and the fire burns low. You know you will wake stiff, your breath visible in the cold room. But for now, you rest on that mattress, whether straw or feather, and let your thoughts drift. And your mind settles on this idea. No matter how grand the castle or how noble the night, the fight for warmth was never fully won. A feather bed might feel like triumph, but dawn always came, bringing another day of icy corridors and frosted glass. Still, for a few hours, you sink into sleep, held by rustling straw or soft feathers, and that is enough to survive even the coldest nights. The mattress gives what comfort it can, but soon it becomes clear that bedding alone isn't enough. To truly resist the night's chill, nights often added another layer: animal skins. You pull a heavy pelt over yourself, and instantly the scent rises, earthy, musky, carrying hints of the forest it came from. There's no mistaking it. You are lying beneath warmth, but also beneath a memory of the hunt. Records from noble households confirm that pelts were among the most valued insulation. Thick hides from deer, bear, wolf, or even boar were draped across beds. They were heavy, pressing down like an anchor, but that weight brought security. Fur trapped heat in ways woven cloth couldn't match. A knight returning frozen from patrol would sink under these covers and feel warmth slowly return to his limbs. It wasn't sudden comfort, but a gradual thaw, like a reluctant fire catching on damp logs. What's interesting is how the type of fur mattered for both warmth and status. Bear skins carried a sense of power tied to the animal's strength. Wolf pelts reflected the wild dangers outside the castle, now controlled and tamed for the bed. Deer hides suggested nobility, reminding visitors of hunts reserved for the elite. Even the choice of which animal you slept beneath served as a quiet boast, a knightly symbol of rank. One vivid example from a 14th century inventory describes a noblewoman's bed covered with 8 pelts, each trimmed with embroidery. Imagine it, the hides showing hunting skill, the stitching transforming them into artwork. Anyone entering that room would see not just warmth, but wealth woven into every edge. Yet there was another side: the smell. Unlike clean wool, pelts often kept the scent of tanning oil, animal musk, or lingering dampness. Picture curling under one and catching a smell somewhere between leather and barnyard. Effective, yes, but never completely refined. Writers from the period even joked about knights climbing into bed only to be reminded of the very beast they had hunted months earlier. Sleep came wrapped in reminders that the wild world was still close. Archaeology also points to their practical value. Fur throws doubled as travel cloaks. A knight on campaign might roll a pelt into his pack, sleeping under it in the open fields one night and spreading it across his castle bed the next. Portability mattered. Unlike bulky feather mattresses, pelts followed a man wherever he went, making them a flexible defense against both drafty rooms and freezing camps. Amusingly, some chroniclers describe nobles arguing over who had rights to particular pelts. Families passed certain hides down as heirlooms, almost like jewels. Brothers fought over inherited bear skins, each insisting it was too valuable to divide. It's strangely relatable, warriors quarreling like children over a blanket. Scholars today still debate how common pelts actually were. Some believe every knightly household had several, since hunting served both sport and necessity. Others warn that written records focus on the wealthy, leaving questions about how many lower-ranking retainers relied instead on coarse wool. Excavations do show traces of fur in modest homes too, meaning pelts weren't exclusive luxuries. The evidence is intriguing but incomplete. In your imagined chamber, you feel the fur beneath your fingers, coarse guard hairs on the surface, a softer underlayer against your skin. There's a certain closeness to it, a reminder that the boundary between civilization and wilderness was thin. Each night, knights wrapped themselves not just in fabric crafted by people, but in the skins of animals that once roamed the same forests. The bed became a meeting point between human life and nature. Close your eyes and the feeling deepens. The pelt's weight steadies you, grounding you like a quiet embrace from the earth. Outside the shuttered windows, wolves howl into the night. Inside, one of their kin rests across your chest, no longer a threat, but protection. It is both strange and reassuring. There was another practice worth noting: lining bed curtains with fur. This created small caves of warmth. Picture pulling the heavy drapes around you, their insides covered with fur, turning your bed into a sheltered den. You'd climb in, close the curtains, and suddenly you weren't a night in a cold chamber anymore. You were something closer to an animal conserving heat. And perhaps that was exactly what winter required, setting pride aside, copying the creatures that survived the cold, and letting instinct guide you. But even this had limits. Not even the warmest fur could block every draft. When the fire burned down and wind slid through cracks in the shutters, the chill always returned. You might pull the pelts tighter, bury your face in their folds, and still wake with frost clinging to your beard. Nothing in a medieval castle guaranteed protection from the cold. Comfort was relative, measured less by how cozy you felt and more by whether you made it through the night with your blood still moving. Yet the psychological relief was real. After hours spent in freezing corridors, wearing heavy armor, or training in the yard, slipping beneath thick furs must have felt like a small victory. Your body would almost sigh in relief, muscles loosening, breath slowing, warmth slowly returning. It wasn't luxury by modern standards, but a form of survival wrapped in fur. As you sink deeper into this imagined night, you pull the pelt higher. Its musk fades as your senses dull, leaving only weight and warmth. Outside, snow piles against the stone walls. Somewhere, servants tend the fire with the last pieces of wood. And you, a night in the cold season, surrender to sleep under the quiet protection of animals whose skins now serve as your fortress inside stone walls. The pelts press heavily across you, yet the cold still sneaks in along the edges. You begin to see why a castle never depended on bedding alone. A fire burns across the room, its glow faint against damp stone. The hearth is the heart of the chamber, but it still feels like a distant ally, flickering bravely while failing to warm every corner. You watch the flames move and tremble along the carved mantel and realize how essential fire was to every medieval night. One commonly noted part of castle design is that fireplaces weren't always present in early structures. Many great halls began with open hearths in the middle of the floor, sending smoke upward through a roof vent. Later on, as construction improved, wall-mounted fireplaces with chimneys became standard, especially in private rooms. These were impressive for their time, directing smoke upward while providing a controlled source of heat. Without them, rooms would have filled with choking fumes. With them, at least you could breathe, even if you still shivered. But truthfully, these fireplaces, noble as they appeared, were still very inefficient. Most of their heat escaped straight up the chimney, while cold drafts slipped in through windows and doors. You can imagine sitting close to the fire, your face warm while your back stays frozen. The contrast is almost amusing, half your body in summer, half in winter, all at once. What may interest you is how people tried to balance this out. Some homes used large metal firebacks decorated with coats of arms to reflect heat into the room. Others tried screens or angled stones to trap warmth. None fully solved the issue, but they showed a kind of medieval creativity driven by need. Because even inside castles, warmth was a problem no one completely solved. A curious account from a 15th century manor describes servants keeping the fire burning all night, not for light, but so the lord could rise without shivering. You can picture a tired attendant entering quietly at midnight, adding another log, trying not to wake his master. Fire wasn't just a convenience, it required constant labor. Heat depended as much on human effort as on fuel. And the fuel itself told another story. Castles consumed incredible amounts of wood. Entire forests were maintained to supply hearths and kitchens. Some places used peat or coal, though the smoke often smelled unpleasant. When shortages happened, fires burned lower, and those nights must have been endless. Scholars still debate whether such shortages shaped winter routines. Did households ration wood? Did nights stay longer in communal halls to share warmth, leaving private rooms cold and unused? The records don't give a clear answer. Now return to your chamber. You're tucked under furs, but your eyes keep drifting toward the flames. The crackling wood is calming, a soft contrast to the wind outside. Sparks leap like tiny stars before fading. Smoke curls upward into the chimney's throat. For a moment, the fire feels reassuring, as if the cold will stay outside the stone walls. But move even slightly farther from the hearth, and the warmth disappears quickly. At the edge of the bed, it's already faded. The air touches your skin again, heavy, damp, and cold. Fire offered comfort only nearby. Unless you slept right next to it, risking burns or sparks, the chill was impossible to escape. Here's a small practice worth imagining. Some lords placed their beds directly beside the fireplace, close enough that heat touched the thick bed curtains. Servants worried about stray sparks, but the masters insisted. Better a scorched curtain than a freezing face. It's almost charming to picture a powerful knight arranging his bed like a child shifting closer to a campfire. Archaeological studies show fireplaces built into walls thick enough to walk through. Some even had hidden passages where servants could add fuel without disturbing the sleeper. Imagine drifting off without knowing a boy had slipped behind the wall to feed the flames. Warmth in such chambers came not just from wood and stone, but from unseen hands keeping watch through the night. Yet even with such engineering and constant labor, fire remained an unreliable companion. You might wake at dawn to frost forming inside your shutters, ice crystals spread like lace across the wood. Your breath hangs in the air even though embers still glow faintly. Comfort was never complete. It was temporary, delicate, and easily lost. As you drift half asleep, picture the firelight moving across the beams overhead. The warmth brushes your cheeks but refuses to stay with you into sleep. You know you'll wake cold again, but the crackle offers a kind of lullaby. A reminder that the night is being resisted, even if not defeated. That is the paradox of the castle hearth. A sign of wealth, labor, and skill, yet still proof that even the richest knight shivered. The fire burned, but the cold always returned. Still, it provided enough warmth to quiet your mind and let sleep come, even on the harshest nights. The hearth now burns low, its embers sighing more than crackling. You shift beneath your pelts, grateful for what little warmth remains, when you notice another glow nearby, not the large fire, but something smaller. Portable braziers. These iron or bronze bowls filled with coals sat around chambers like small guardians of the night. They were less dramatic than a full hearth, but they provided heat exactly where it was needed most, right beside you, near your bed. Period accounts describe how households relied on these portable heaters not only in bedrooms, but also in hallways, chapels, and even cold stairwells. Picture yourself carrying one carefully by its handles, the embers shifting like dull red stones inside. Place it beside your bed, and the air warms just enough for your hands to relax. Without it, the cold feels endless. With it, you can finally breathe without constant shivering. Archaeology supports their widespread use. Metal braziers have been found with soot still clinging to their surfaces. Some are decorated with leaf patterns or animal motifs. They were practical tools, but they also showed an appreciation for craftsmanship, a reminder that even simple survival could include beauty. People would fall asleep with a soft orange glow beside them, shadows flickering like candlelight but steadier, almost calming. What stands out is how dangerous they could be. Braziers burned oxygen and filled rooms with smoke if ventilation was poor. Records tell of families overcome by fumes, drifting into unconsciousness and never waking again. One chronicle even warns of knights who sought heat but met their end instead. It is a stark reminder that even the pursuit of warmth carried risks. Yet people still relied on them because alternatives were limited. Without these glowing bowls, winter nights could reach deep into your bones. With them, there was at least a small sense of comfort, even if temporary. There is something distinctly human in that choice. The willingness to risk a smoky room rather than surrender to freezing temperatures. A curious note from a Florentine merchant describes adding aromatic herbs to the coals so the smoke would scent the chamber while it heated it. Lavender, rosemary, and dried orange peels were tossed onto the fire to soften the harsh smell of burning charcoal. Imagine falling asleep as fragrant smoke winds through your blankets, soothing in one sense, slightly unsettling in another. It wasn't just heat, it was an atmosphere. Researchers still debate how common these habits were outside wealthy homes. Some argue only nobles owned several braziers, while ordinary retainers slept in shared rooms, relying on body heat. Others believe that even modest households had simple clay or iron heaters. The evidence is incomplete, reminding us that your experience on a winter night often depended more on social rank than need. You lie back and watch the braziers glow. The coals pulse softly, dimming and flaring like a slow heartbeat. The air near your face warms, almost like spring, while your feet still throb with cold. That uneven comfort is aggravating, but also strangely realistic. Life in a castle was always a compromise. No perfect solutions, only partial improvements. Another small custom appears in some household records. Servants would bring braziers into their masters' beds before sleep, sliding them beneath thick covers to warm the sheets. At the last moment, they removed the coals to prevent burns. The bed stayed warm briefly, long enough to fall asleep before the chill crept back. Imagine climbing into a bed warmed only minutes earlier, the sheets pleasantly heated, your sigh echoing in a stone room. It feels remarkably similar to a modern electric blanket, just without the safety features. Of course, the brazier couldn't silence the castle's sounds. You would still hear wind hissing through arrow slits, beams groaning under strain, and the occasional drip of melting ice. The brazier acts like a small sun in the darkness, but it also highlights how cold the surroundings remain, making the shadows seem deeper. There is comfort, but it is fragile. One careless movement or draft could scatter sparks across the floor. Every warm night carried its own hazards. Still, you close your eyes and remain in that moment. The faint warmth on your cheek, the scented smoke softening the air, the flickering glow behind your eyelids. You know the brazier will dim before dawn. You know servants will arrive to clean the ashes and prepare the chamber again. But for now, this is enough. You have turned a harsh room into something almost welcoming. It's tempting to think of knights as people immune to discomfort. Yet here you see them as ordinary humans, seeking warmth, accepting risks, and choosing small comforts for the chance to rest. In the quiet room, with a brazier beside you, you realize survival was rarely dramatic or glorious. It was built on small choices, coals glowing just long enough to lead you into sleep. As you drift, the idea lingers. Comfort in a medieval castle was never guaranteed, always incomplete, but constantly pursued with creativity. Tonight, your companion is a bowl of burning coals. Tomorrow, perhaps something else. But for now, you give in to its light and finally rest. As the brazier fades and you shift beneath your furs, you feel the draft touch your cheek again. That's when you realize another essential tool against the cold: curtains. Not the thin decorative kind you might picture, but heavy hangings that turned a bed into a sheltered space within the chamber. You pull the fabric inward, closing it around the carved posts until the outside world disappears. Suddenly, you're no longer lying in a vast, drafty room, you're inside a cocoon. Inventories from the late Middle Ages show how valued these enclosed beds were. They weren't limited to nobles, though wealth did affect the quality of materials. Some had velvet dyed in deep colors, while others used wool or coarse linen. Whatever the fabric, the purpose remained the same: to stop constant drafts by creating a small tent inside the room. The curtains trapped the warmth of your body, your breath, and even the weak glow of a brazier nearby. And you notice something else once they are drawn: the sound shifts. The echoes of the chamber fade, replaced by a muted stillness. The wind still moves through arrow slits, but it seems far away now, softened by the layers of cloth. You hear only your own breathing and the quiet rustle of blankets. The bed becomes an island of calm inside the cold stone space. One piece of evidence describes the work required to maintain these curtains. They had to be washed or beaten clean of soot, mended when moths damaged them, and carefully arranged each night by servants. A large bed could need 2 or 3 attendants to prepare it. You can imagine them moving around the posts, tying cords, fixing fasteners, and smoothing the fabric while their master waited to climb inside. What might surprise you is how much privacy these curtains provided in a world where solitude was rare. Castles were busy places, with rooms shared by attendants, guards, or family members. Drawing the curtains offered warmth, but also a moment of seclusion. Inside, you could whisper prayers, share quiet conversations, or simply enjoy the silence. The curtains were both insulation and escape. Some accounts even describe beds with curtains embroidered with religious images or family symbols. nightly reminders of belief and heritage. Imagine falling asleep each night. Imagine gazing at stitched saints or your own coat of arms, their outlines faintly lit by candlelight. For one night, the bed was more than a place to sleep, it was a canvas of identity. Scholars debate how effective bed curtains truly were. Some suggest that in large, drafty halls, their warmth was minimal, as cold air still leaked through the top and bottom. Others argue that even a small barrier could make the difference between shivering all night and sleeping comfortably. Likely, the truth varied depending on fabric thickness, bed size, and the determination of the sleeper. Now picture yourself inside such a bed. You slide into the narrow space, pull the curtains tight, and suddenly the rest of the chamber feels distant. Your body heat rises quickly, your breath fogging the air until it feels almost stifling. Darkness surrounds you, broken only by the faint glow where fabric overlaps. You feel safe, sheltered, suspended between wakefulness and sleep. A curious story comes from the court of Burgundy. One duke reportedly kept a small dog at the foot of his curtained bed, believing its warmth added to his own. Whether true or not, the image is endearing, a mighty lord, conqueror of battles, tucked into a fabric cocoon with a snoring companion at his toes. It reflects a universal need for warmth and the lengths people went to achieve it. Closing the curtains itself was often a ritual. Servants might murmur blessings as they tied the cords, guarding against cold and spirits. In some areas, drafts were thought to carry illness, making the curtain a protective shield. You can almost hear the whispered words, the soft rustle of fabric, the sense of finality as the last tie is secured. As the day's weight lifts, you no longer feel like a knight bracing against discomfort. Instead, you feel, if only temporarily, enveloped in warmth. Fur against skin, layers of fabric muffling the outside world, and your mind drifts. Yet, these beds could also be stifling. Too many layers or trapped breath could make the air heavy. Some accounts describe sleepers opening a corner for fresh air, only to regret it when a draft cut through. Comfort was delicate. Too closed and you sweated, too open and you froze. Despite imperfections, curtain beds remain an evocative symbol of medieval domestic life. They show ingenuity, status, and the determination to endure winter nights in stone fortresses. As you rest in your imagined canopy, you realize comfort was never guaranteed, but people created it wherever they could. Eyes closed, muffled by darkness, you are suspended in time. Outside, the wind may howl and fires may die, but inside this cocoon, you have found sanctuary, the greatest triumph of all. The warmth you feel is not yours alone. Long before you lay down, servants prepared the room, often unseen and uncelebrated it. Without them, no knight could have slept comfortably on frozen nights. Records of noble households describe elaborate nightly preparations, strewed rushes, arranged pelts, layered blankets, and even beds warmed with hot stones wrapped in cloth. Servants moved quickly, often in groups, each completing a small task. The sounds of footsteps on flagstones, muffled voices, and the clink of a brazier in motion would have filled the room. One detailed 14th-century record shows servants placing warming pans filled with glowing embers beneath the sheets, removing them just before the master entered bed. Too much heat could scorch the linens, too little left the bed cold. Picture a young page, iron tongs in hand, concentrating, silently praying not to set the mattress on fire. The risk was real, yet this effort turned misery into tolerable comfort. Much of this preparation carried symbolic meaning. Servants didn't just make beds, they performed rituals of order and service. A neatly spread blanket represented loyalty. A properly warmed chamber showed discipline and respect. In households where hierarchy mattered, even the bed reflected the structure of obedience. Letters and chronicles reveal small anecdotes. A nobleman scolding attendants for inadequately herbed rushes, or a lady's chamber scented with burning rosemary to repel unhealthy vapors. Whether superstition or belief, these touches turned bedtime into something layered with meaning. Modern researchers debate how far such rituals extended beyond aristocratic homes. Some argue only grand castles enjoyed such elaborate practices, while lesser knights prepared their chambers themselves, relying on squires rather than a troop of servants. Others suggest modest households had scaled-down versions, as warmth was not a luxury, it was survival. Likely, the truth lies somewhere in between. Now imagine yourself again in the chamber. The servants have gone, leaving traces of their work. The fire glows steadily, the floor carries a faint herbal scent, and bedclothes are neatly arranged, pelts smoothed and layered. You lie down into order, warmth, and invisible care. Every detail reflects another's hand. There's humility in that realization. Knights rode into battle, praised for courage, yet their nightly survival depended on quiet figures who earned no ballads. A prepared chamber was the foundation of rest. Without it, no bravery could keep frost from creeping into bones. In some households, attendants whispered small prayers while preparing the bed, asking for protection against both cold and spirits. The line between physical and spiritual comfort blurred. When you picture a servant tucking in a fur blanket, you can almost hear, "God keep you warm tonight." The act was both duty and faith. The routine carried its own rhythm. Servants arrived at twilight, completed their tasks, and departed silently. Pages tiptoed back in the night to check the fire, bare feet softly slapping stone floors. Every step, every gesture, contributed to a comfort that was practical, symbolic, and profound. The bed you lie in is more than just fabric. It's the product of hours of labor and careful attention. That unseen effort lingers even as you drift to sleep. Of course, it wasn't always flawless. Records mention mistakes, forgotten coals, damp blankets, firewood poorly stacked. Mistakes were noticed, and punishments could be harsh. One servant's error could disturb a lord's comfort, and in the strict hierarchy of a castle, discomfort often sparked anger. Perhaps this explains the meticulous care. They worked not only out of duty but also out of fear. Yet there's comfort in imagining their presence. Someone cared, or was compelled, to banish the night's chill before you arrived. Their unseen labor surrounds you now. In each layer of fabric, every glowing ember, every subtle scent in the air. Your rest relies not just on your own strength, but on the invisible efforts of many hands. Close your eyes, and you can almost hear them, the soft shuffle of feet, the quiet clink of tongs, the whispered blessing as curtains are drawn. The chamber is silent now, but that silence was carefully built, step by step, by those who came before. You lie wrapped in their work, your breath slowing. Outside, the night is bitter, the wind sharp against the battlements. But here, order has been carved from chaos. Finally, you can let go. The servants have left, the room prepared, but the warmth remains fragile. You shift beneath your blankets and pelts, thinking of one final secret that made the difference between comfort and misery: sharing. In the medieval world, a bed was rarely yours alone. Companionship, whether chosen or enforced, was another defense against the cold. Knights, despite their fierce armor, rarely demanded solitude. Household records show that men of rank often slept beside squires, brothers-in-arms, or fellow retainers. Sometimes this was necessity, too few beds for too many bodies. Sometimes strategy, shared warmth multiplied. Sometimes it was simply custom. Bedding was expensive: mattresses, blankets, pelts, curtains. These were valuable commodities, not easily replaced. Sharing preserved resources and increased warmth. A squire might curl at the foot of a lord's bed, ready to serve at dawn while benefiting from the heat. Companions could lie shoulder to shoulder, trapping warmth beneath one cover. This practice was practical, and no one questioned its necessity. One English inventory notes a bed large enough for 4 people, owned by a wealthy knight. Not extravagance, logistics. More bodies meant more warmth. The bed became a communal shelter, a fortress against the cold. Imagine muffled breathing in the dark, the sound of armored men becoming human again, each exhale forming a rhythm that drew them towards sleep. Humor often appeared in these arrangements. Some accounts mention disputes over the warmer middle spot or who guarded the edge near the curtain. Brothers, friends, and squires likely joked or grumbled about cold toes waking them. These weren't solemn rituals. They were messy, human moments where laughter and irritation mingled with survival. Historians still debate how often knights shared beds with peers versus subordinates. Some suggest rank-dictated placement. Lords rarely shared outside family, squires crowded together by the dozen. Others argue necessity blurred lines, especially during travel or war. Winter campaigns cram tents with bodies, hierarchy melting before frost. The records differ, leaving a vivid yet uncertain picture. You roll onto your side, imagining warmth beside you. The chamber is cold, yes, but shared heat makes it bearable. Your breath mingles with another's, forming faint clouds in the curtained dark. This intimacy is not romantic, nor always friendly, but born of necessity. To survive the night, you accept closeness. To wake alive, you surrender privacy. An anecdote from a Burgundian chronicle recalls two knights disturbed by their lord's snoring. The heat in the middle of the bed was worth enduring sleepless nights on the edges. Picture proud warriors caught between irritation and frostbite. It's comical, yet deeply relatable. Squires, young men training under knights, shared drafty bunks. They whispered, laughed, sometimes quarreled, their chatter echoing off stone walls. Bonds formed in these nights were as strong as those forged on the battlefield. Sleep was survival, yes, but also fellowship. Historians debate whether these arrangements were purely practical or carried social significance. Did they strengthen loyalty? Blur class lines in harsh winters? Or were they just one more compromise, forgotten in the morning rush to armor and duty? No single answer satisfies everyone. The image remains vivid. A curtained chamber, a faintly glowing brazier, 2 or 3 bodies pressed beneath heavy blankets. Wool, leather, and smoke fill the air. The warmth rises gradually. And despite yourself, you drift. Close your eyes, and you are not alone in this castle night. Someone's breath rustles softly. The cold feels less threatening, held at bay by human presence. Warmth is worth the awkwardness. Survival is worth the closeness. The greatest defense against the coldest night was not stone, fire, or pelts, it was each other. As your body relaxes, another scent stirs. It isn't smoke or pelts, it's fresh, green, faintly sweet. Rushes lie underfoot. Every few weeks, servants scattered these reeds or straw across floors to soften stone and mask odors. Tonight, their fragrance rises gently, blending with smoke and damp, reminding you that this room smells like both meadow and chimney. Written records confirm the practice. Floors were covered with rushes or hay, sometimes mixed with herbs like lavender, chamomile, or rosemary. They provided slight insulation and a subtle comfort amid stone walls. Against the cold, the rushes offered a faint, pleasant aroma amidst the mustiness. This wasn't merely decorative, it was an early form of hygiene, long before tiled floors or carpets became common. In chambers where knights and squires trudged through mud, ash, and sweat, any attempt at cleanliness was meaningful. The rushes served both practical and symbolic purposes. Their crunch underfoot signaled that the chamber had been refreshed, its filth temporarily buried. Guests noticed this too. Stepping onto green rushes indicated a space cared for, a place where effort had been made to protect and welcome. Even a weary knight could recognize such attention to detail and feel reassured. A curious note from a 15th-century household record describes adding fennel and mint to rushes to sweeten the lord's sleep. Whether it truly affected dreams is unknown, but the notion of herbs underfoot subtly influencing rest is charming. Imagine a faint scent of mint rising as you pull your blanket closer. Archaeologists have confirmed these floor coverings in castles, showing their widespread use over centuries. The plant mixture often included hay, leaves, and even straw from stables, producing a range of scents, some sweet, some far less so. One could almost imagine trying to sleep while rosemary mingled with unmistakable barnyard odors. Life rarely smelled perfect. Scholars debate how often rushes were replaced. Wealthy households likely refreshed them regularly, while poorer rooms may have layered old and new for months, trapping scent and vermin alike. The truth varied. Noble chambers could enjoy weekly fresh herbs, whereas lesser rooms remained grim until spring cleaning. Tonight, the rushes under you are fresh, softening the castle's damp chill. Even sound contributed to their effect. As servants crossed the floor, the rushes rustled, shifting in bed echoed faintly. In a stone chamber otherwise dominated by hollow silence, these sounds were oddly comforting, like the whisper of summer grass carried into winter. Some noble households took pride in their chosen herbs. One chronicler notes a lady who scattered rose petals among rushes in extravagant flourish. Picture lying in bed, smelling roses beneath your boots while the moat froze outside. Luxury was often more about display than practicality. You roll onto your side, pulling furs closer, inhaling a mixture of smoke, damp leather, lavender, mint, and hay. It's an imperfect combination, yet strangely calming. In a time when baths were rare and castle walls damp, such freshness mattered. It wasn't just air, it was spirit. Sleeping in a room that smelled alive was a reminder that winter would eventually end. Interestingly, rushes were sometimes believed to carry protective powers, warding off illness thought to spread through the air. Good scents were seen as a defense against harmful humors, a primitive, superstitious form of germ theory. Servants weren't just scattering herbs, they were performing a ritual of protection. By morning, the fragrance would fade, leaving smoke and sweat behind. But for these hours, rushes softened not only the floor but the atmosphere itself, demonstrating that even in stone castles, people sought small comforts. Your eyelids grow heavy. Beneath you, the faint rustle of herbs. Around you, curtains blocking drafts. Over you, pelts pressed close. Within you, a growing sense of calm. Survival in a medieval castle wasn't merely enduring cold. It was about finding fragments of comfort, sounds, scents, textures, that made the night bearable. Tonight, that comfort comes from the meadow beneath your feet, carried into your dreams. Yet the castle was never truly sealed. Drafts found every gap, slipping through like invisible fingers. Pull your blankets higher, but the chill still brushes your cheeks. Step outside the curtains, and the corridors reveal icy air rushing through cracks, joints, and arrow slits. Large halls trapped echoes, not warmth. Walking barefoot at night, the stone bit into your soles, the wind stung your eyes. Even a battle-hardened knight might curse under his breath. Archaeological evidence confirms minimal insulation. Thick walls retained cold, radiating it like ice. No tapestry could fully block it. The fortress, built to resist invaders, functioned as a giant refrigerator. The drafts brought constant sound. Wind whistled at shutters, moaned in halls, hummed through cracks. At night, these noises could sound like voices. Servants whispered of ghosts carried on the air. Modern historians debate whether tapestries or paneling reduced drafts significantly. Accounts describe both comfort and complaint, suggesting experiences varied by castle or chamber. Tonight, your room is partially defended. Curtains help, but drafts sneak in each time you shift them. A 13th-century letter recounts a guest whose candle repeatedly blew out from a rushing wind in a lord's chamber, as if the walls themselves breathed. Picture standing in a fortress with sputtering flames. It's both absurd and believable. You tug your blanket tighter, imagining the truth of it. Nighttime walks in corridors were even harsher, guards pacing in cloaks, bracing against the icy gusts. You hear the sound of boots echoing down the hall, each step mingling with the rattle of doors and the groan of timbers. The cold air carries more than chill. It carries sound, turning every corridor into an instrument played by winter itself. Yet, people adapted. Heavy tapestries softened drafts, doorways were layered with thick curtains or furs, and beds were placed away from exterior walls whenever possible. A knight understood that comfort often depended as much on bed placement as on bedding itself. Despite these efforts, warmth remained fleeting. Even nobles wrapped in layers and thick blankets would wake to frost clinging to their covers. Drafts were inescapable, part of daily life in a castle. Picture the corridor outside your chamber. Torches flicker, flames bent sideways by invisible gusts. Shadows dance across the walls. A guard trudges past, his cloak snapping as he rounds a corner. A shutter bangs softly, keeping time with the wind. This is a castle at night, not silent, not calm, but alive with restless air. The irony is clear. The same openings that chilled you by night protected you by day. Arrow slits, wide inside and narrow outside, allowed defenders to fire safely while keeping enemies out. The drafts that stole your warmth were the price of security. Safety and shivering came together. Every breath of cold air, every sigh of wind is part of the building itself. The castle seems alive, breathing through its gaps, reminding you that you're never fully sheltered. You survive not because the fortress shields you perfectly, but because you endure its flaws. You pull yourself beneath the pelts, grateful for your curtained cocoon. Outside, the chamber is a cavern of drafts. Inside, you've carved a bubble of warmth. As your breathing slows, the moan of wind becomes background music, unwanted, eerie, but constant. You fall asleep, not in silence, but in uneasy companionship with the cold. The wind weaves through the stone like a restless spirit. Even wrapped in warmth, your ears remain alert. In the still of night, sound travels with startling clarity, shaping sleep as much as the cold does. Medieval accounts often remark on the oddness of nighttime in a fortress. There was no hum of machines or traffic, only elemental noises, the creak of timber, the whistle of drafts, the crack of settling stone, and distant human sounds, guards stamping, dogs barking, a chain clinking. In such silence, every sound seemed amplified. Archaeological studies show how stone walls carried echoes. A whisper on a stairwell might reach far, a dropped poker in the great hall could reverberate into upper chambers. Falling asleep meant half-awareness never fully faded. Interestingly, it was the quiet that unsettled people. Modern ears might find it peaceful, but to those accustomed to daytime noise, the sudden stillness felt unnatural. Chronicles describe noblemen disturbed by silence, seeing omens in the absence of sound. Dogs stopping, the wind pausing, hearts would quicken. Stories and legends added to the unease. Ghosts wandering corridors, murdered retainers, ladies in white near chapels. Servants whispered these tales, and once planted, they shaped dreams. The groan of a beam became the sigh of a forgotten soul, the wind through arrow slits, a lament. Sleep arrived, but uneasily. A curious record from a French manor tells of a guest kept awake by a wooden stair that groaned so loudly it seemed haunted. In reality, it was just timber reacting to cold, but to a half-asleep mind, the line between wood and ghost blurred. Scholars debate how restful castle sleep truly was. Some argue fatigue from labor and training overcame distractions. Others point to frequent mentions of sleepless nights in letters, suggesting the environment intruded constantly. Both are believable. Exhaustion tugged one into dreams while every creak and echo pulled them back. Under your blankets, sounds sharpen. A shutter flutters, a guard coughs, a wolf howls in the distance. The castle feels immense yet intimate, vast halls echoing, yet close enough to hear someone clearing their throat through walls. Privacy was never complete, a nightly reminder. Yet those same sounds could comfort. A guard's footsteps meant watchfulness, a dog's bark meant life beyond the walls, the wind's moan meant you were indoors rather than exposed. Compared to nights on campaign, in tents and open fields, a creaking beam reassured. Imagine the mixed chorus of a castle at night, snores from chambers, water dripping from gutters, horses faintly neighing below. None of it matched, yet together it formed a lullaby. The noises that first frightened newcomers became rhythms of survival. Over time, sleep depended on them. Lying awake, the castle seems alive. Timbers creak like joints, wind moans like breath. The walls themselves participate in the nighttime symphony. A faint hum rises with the shifting stone beneath you. It feels less like a building and more like the belly of some enormous creature. For now, you are safe, though never entirely in control. Close your eyes again. The silence is never complete, but it softens, wrapping around you. The castle sounds blend into one another, forming a background hum that finally allows your mind to drift. Nights in these fortresses were never about eliminating disturbance. They were about accepting it, letting the creaks, moans, and whispers become part of the dream itself. And so you rest, half cradled by stone, half haunted by it, aware that morning will bring life's noise again. But for now, in the quiet chaos of a medieval night, you slip into uneasy yet inevitable sleep. Lying there, warmed by pelts and blankets, your thoughts linger on rituals. The coldest nights were not merely endured through fire and fabric, they were softened by prayer. Before settling beneath curtains and furs, one would kneel, clasp hands, and whisper words to the heavens, asking not only for warmth but for safety through the dark. Manuscripts and personal accounts confirm evening prayers were a daily habit. Compline, the final monastic office of the day, influenced lay practice. Knights, especially those bound by oaths to lords or orders, recited psalms before sleep, Latin phrases rolling softly off their tongues. Domini, commendo spiritum meum, Lord, I commend my spirit. Imagine kneeling at the bedside, breath fogging the air, whispering these words while the fire flickered low. The chamber became a temporary chapel. These prayers were not always lofty. Many were simple requests for family safety, health, or protection from fever and frost. A common plea asked God to shield from the night's dangers. In a drafty castle, with illness and the constant threat of attack, such dangers felt real. While awake, swords may not frighten you, but in sleep, you were vulnerable. Prayer served as armor for the hours you could not defend yourself. The rituals were often physical. Knights crossed themselves, kissed crucifixes, or traced blessings onto blankets. These gestures soothed the body as much as they sought divine protection. Imagine touching cool metal, then crawling beneath rough wool, grounding yourself between earth and heaven. Some knights kept relics or charms under their pillows, a fragment of a saint's bone, a piece of the true cross, or a blessed medal. Faith or superstition, these tokens offered reassurance during lonely hours. A soldier facing death daily still sought heavenly protection while asleep. Historians debate whether these prayers were deeply heartfelt or routine. Some argue knights prayed sincerely, steeped in a culture where faith permeated life. Others suggest many words were muttered half asleep, more habit than devotion. Likely it was both. In such an uncertain world, faith and superstition blurred, and ritual itself became comfort. A 14th-century anecdote illustrates this. A knight fell asleep mid-prayer, kneeling beside his bed, head resting on the mattress. His squire found him in the same position at dawn. Devotion, exhaustion, or both? This snapshot shows men caught between piety and fatigue, clinging to ritual even as sleep claimed them. Imagine performing the same act. Kneeling beside the bed, knees pressing into cold rushes, breath misting in torchlight, you murmur psalms. Firelight flickers on a crucifix, shadows stretching across stone. You feel small, humbled by the night's enormity. Prayer grants courage to surrender to sleep, trusting the world will remain upon waking. These prayers also functioned as medieval sleep aids. The rhythm of verses, the repetitive cadence of Latin chants, lulled the mind. Just as lullabies soothe children, so did these chants calm warriors. Words for God doubled as music for rest. Close your eyes, sensing the peace that follows. The prayers linger, woven into the air. Outside, drafts howl, wolves cry, yet inside, you feel cradled by more than blankets. Shielded by something larger, divine or imagined, you can finally rest. Your body grows heavy, your mind lighter. Cold risks remain, but your heart slows. Armed not with steel but with words, you drift into sleep. Spiritual armor, as vital as furs or fire, gave courage to close your eyes in a perilous world. The final echoes of prayer wrap around you like curtains, sealing out darkness. Even as sleep claims you, the castle is not silent. Outside your cocoon, men remain awake. Centuries keep watch through bitter hours, as relentless as the winter night. Picture them, cloaks drawn tight, torches sputtering, eyes heavy but alert. While you nestle beneath pelts, they stamp frozen flagstones to keep blood flowing. Castle records and ordinances note the rotation of guards. Even in smaller households, someone remained vigilant against thieves, enemies, or fire. Squires and men-at-arms shared this duty, trudging battlements while others slept. The wind cut through wool, chilling to the bone. Guards devised countless methods to endure vigils. Chronicles describe clapping hands, pacing walls, or crouching near small braziers. Some kept dogs nearby, providing warmth and alerting to intruders. A soldier sharing duty with a shivering hound, both listening for sounds in the dark. This image is quietly touching. In chambers like these, every sound carried meaning. The echo of boots on stone, distant murmurs of voices, even the occasional clang of weapons. They were constant reminders that vigilance never stopped. Lying in bed, you might drift toward sleep while faintly aware of unseen guardians outside. That awareness was reassuring, though it also hinted at danger lurking beyond the walls. A curious record from a German castle mentions that sentries were punished for falling asleep on duty by being forced to stand barefoot in the snow. The cruelty is striking, but it emphasizes how vital their alertness was. A single lapse could endanger everyone inside. In this way, guards suffered so that others could rest, their discomfort the price of your uneasy comfort. Historians still debate whether the presence of guards truly reassured sleepers or unsettled them. Some believe the rhythmic sounds of patrols acted like a protective heartbeat. Others argue they served as reminders of the threats outside, preventing full relaxation. Perhaps it was both, reassurance entwined with tension, comfort shadowed by unease. Picture it now. You lie beneath thick pelts, eyes half closed, while faint footsteps echo along the battlements. Voices murmur softly through shutters, and a watchdog barks. The wind rushes, the fire hisses, yet the rhythm of life outside continues. You know the men are cold, tired, perhaps cursing their fate. And yet, their presence allows you to release tension, even if only briefly. A humorous note survives in the chronicles. One lord complained that he could not sleep because the sentries' stamping feet beneath his window shook the shutters all night. Ironically, the very men meant to protect his rest disturbed it instead. You can almost picture the grumpy lord at dawn, glaring while the shivering guards saluted through chattering teeth. Outside the walls, the countryside lies silent under frost. The moat gleams with a thin layer of ice, and the forest seems frozen in time. Within the fortress, life continues. Fires smolder, dogs stir, and men keep watch. Wrapped in pelts, you feel a thread connecting you to them. Their wakefulness is your blanket, their stamping feet, your lullaby. Close your eyes, and you can almost imagine standing there yourself, scanning the horizon for movement, cold and alert. Behind you, families sleep, lords dream, children murmur in their beds. The responsibility is weighty, yet sacred. Guarding the night means protecting all within. As sleep pulls you deeper, the sentries remain in your mind. You know they will still be there at dawn, weary but steadfast. Their duty frames your dreams, a reminder that rest in a medieval castle was collective. Some endured the night awake so others could close their eyes. And with that, you drift. Outside, boots echo, dogs bark, torches gutter. Inside, you breathe slowly, warmed by blankets and trust. Their watch and your slumber weave the fragile fabric of survival in cold nights. The guards march on, boots echoing against frozen stone. Inside your curtained nest, you feel immense relief. Your armor is off. The iron shell worn during daylight hours has been set aside. Sleeping in armor was nearly impossible. The body ached, joints pinched, and the cold bit where metal pressed against flesh. Campaigns record men collapsing in armor from exhaustion, exceptions born of necessity. In castles, nightly ritual involved unbuckling straps, removing steel, and letting the body breathe. The first sensation of freedom after hours encased in iron must have been exquisite. Stretching, lying flat, shedding weight layer by layer until only linen remained. Chainmail alone could weigh 30 pounds or more. Add greaves, gauntlets, helmet, and breastplate, and each step carried the weight of a small child. The posture, gait, and thought of nights were shaped by it. Laying it aside at night reclaimed the body. Beds became not just places of rest, but relief from the constant burden. Yet traces lingered. Some chroniclers describe nights dreaming of armor even when bare, limbs twitching as if still bound. The heaviness of war seeped into sleep. A French account notes a knight who kept his helmet within arm's reach, convinced he might be attacked. He slept under furs, hand resting on polished steel, half comforted, half burdened by its presence. Scholars debate the long-term effects of armor: chronic back pain, stiff joints, or bodies toughened by training. Either way, removing armor at night must have felt like freeing the soul. Now your body feels lighter. Blankets weigh little compared to steel. You roll your shoulders, flex your legs, and marvel at the softness of fur against skin no longer pressed by metal. Rituals surrounded armor storage. Squires arranged pieces near the bed, polished them, and checked for damage. Some even named their armor, speaking to it like a comrade. It was identity, silent and present even in sleep. Yet nightmares lingered. Tales describe knights muttering in dreams, reliving battles, flinching as if struck by unseen blows. Armor shaped waking hours and unconscious ones alike. Close your eyes, and you can sense phantom weight pressing into dreams. You shift in your fur cocoon, grateful for tonight's freedom. The chamber is still cold, but without steel, warmth finally reaches you. A Burgundian chronicle describes a knight so unused to sleeping without armor during campaigns that, once home, he spent weeks waking in panic, feeling exposed. It took time to trust bed curtains, guards, and the quiet of a castle night. Even warmth feels strange after being so long accustomed to hardness. Sleep, like battle, requires adjustment. And now you lie weightless after days of burden. Your sword rests on a stool, your chain mail folded neatly in a chest, your helmet gleams faintly in the firelight. Tonight, being unarmored does not diminish your status as a knight. It reconnects you with the boy you once were, before steel governed your life. The pelts beneath your skin are soft. The rushes underfoot crackle quietly, and you allow yourself to drift. The armor waits silently, but for now it no longer dictates you. Sleep comes easier without iron as a blanket, when the only weight is your own tired body. In this fragile moment, you discover a comfort closer to peace than to conquest. Memory draws you back to your squire years, before you had even earned the title of knight. Sleep then was neither private nor gentle, it was communal. Squire quarters were crowded, noisy, and rarely warm. Household records confirm this. Dozens of boys, sometimes as young as 12, shared long chambers. They slept on straw pallets or thin mattresses with whatever blankets were available. Curtains were reserved for their masters. Privacy was unknown. Warmth came from numbers, bodies pressed together, the air thick with breath, sweat, and quiet chatter. In some castles, squires received no separate bedding, only cloaks to wrap themselves while lying shoulder to shoulder on rush-strewn floors. Their beds still smelled of horse, sweat, and mud, the same garments worn outdoors during the day. For boys too exhausted to care, it was enough. For those sensitive to smells, it must have been torment. Yet these dormitories were far from silent. Boys whispered jokes, sang snatches of songs, wrestled under blankets, and plotted mischief. Even in darkness, their rooms were alive. The noise perhaps made the cold more bearable, transforming a freezing space into fellowship. A 15th-century account recalls a knight falling asleep to the chorus of a dozen uneven snores. Years later, he could not rest in silence, as if his body had associated sleep with the chaos of youth. Archaeological studies confirm wide dormitory spaces for young men. Nearby ash pits indicate fires were rarely lit indoors due to risk and smoke. Warmth came from cloaks, blankets, and shared bodies. Sleep here meant surrendering not to comfort, but to exhaustion. Scholars debate whether such harsh conditions were deliberate, designed to toughen boys for knighthood, or simply a matter of necessity, too many mouths, too little wealth, too few fabrics. Likely it was both. Close your eyes and imagine returning there. A boy among many, curled on straw, a blanket slipping off your shoulder, elbow dug into your side as a bunkmate shifts. The air smells of hay, sweat, and smoke. Cold bites your toes, yet laughter and whispered gossips soften the edges. You are both miserable and content, too tired to care. The discomfort created bonds. Boys who endured winters together, shivering under shared covers, became men who trusted one another on battlefields. Shared hardship forged camaraderie stronger than armor. Some squires bitterly recalled waking before dawn, blankets whipped away, scrambling for boots in darkness. Sleep was brief, never luxurious, designed to instill discipline. And yet, the crowded dormitories had warmth that no private chamber could match. The press of bodies, the hum of voices, the reassurance of not facing struggle alone. Even now, lying in your private chamber, you recognize that these experiences shaped your resilience. The squire's dormitory was harsh, but it was a place of growth. Winters taught boys to endure cold, find laughter in hardship, and share strength, a preparation no armor could provide. As you drift beneath your noble covers tonight, you hear echoes of that noisy hall, boys' laughter, creaking straw, shuffling feet. You remember the cold, yes, but also the warmth of comradeship. Even the harshest nights left a lasting gift, the memory of never enduring them alone. Now your mind returns to the present. You sleep not as one among many, but as a knight with privacy, or something close to it. For higher ranks, the difference was dramatic. Nobles often had solars, private rooms separated from the great hall, warmer and more richly furnished. Archaeological evidence confirms these rooms were typically on upper floors, with fireplaces, glazed windows if wealth allowed, and elegant furniture. Beds were central, elevated on carved frames, draped in curtains dyed with expensive pigments. Entering such a room signaled immediate authority. Tapestries lined the walls for decoration and insulation, depicting hunts, battles, or biblical stories, softening the cold that stone transmitted. Imagine lying in bed staring at a woven deer eternally pursued across a forest, while beyond the walls, real deer shivered in the frosted woods. A line between outside and inside transformed the chamber into both a gallery and a shelter. Surprisingly, furniture itself contributed to warmth. Nobles stored heavy wooden chests filled with clothing, blankets, and furs, not merely for storage, but as thermal anchors. The massive wood absorbed some of the chill, breaking up the vast emptiness. A bare room felt colder, as if emptiness encouraged drafts, while a cluttered solar could feel almost cozy. An unusual 14th century account tells of a lord who insisted his servants light perfumed candles in his solar at night. They gave little heat, yet the scent of beeswax mixed with herbs refined the room. He claimed it improved his sleep, though display likely played a role too. Imagine drifting off while faintly smelling honey and myrrh, a sharp contrast to the earthy air of a squire's hall. Archaeologists note small aloves, window seats padded with cushions, sometimes lined with fur. These served as daytime retreats and offered additional comfort at night. From bed, the chamber was more than a place to sleep. It became a sanctuary layered with fabrics, textures, and details, signaling mastery over winter, not just survival. Scholars debate the effectiveness of these enhancements. Did solars truly feel warmer, or did furnishings merely create an illusion of comfort? Some argue nobles exaggerated coziness in records to show status, while others point to measurable temperature differences between bare stone rooms and furnished solars. The discussion continues, leaving us to imagine rather than measure. Picture yourself there. Bed curtains drawn tight, a fire crackling in the corner, tapestries muting drafts, and the air scented faintly with beeswax. Compared to the squire's hall, it feels like another world. Quieter, more spacious, undeniably privileged. You can stretch without touching another person, breathe without inhaling a snore. Survival here is intertwined with status. Yet even in a solar, frost creeps along window panes, breath clouds the air, and stone floors hold winter tight. Nobility softened the cold, but never erased it. One amusing household story records a nobleman boasting of warmth, only for a guest to find 4 servants' cloaks tucked beneath his bed covers. Even privilege required practical reinforcement. Luxury was rarely effortless. Tonight, as you rest in your private solar, you appreciate the curtains, fire, and wall hangings. You remember sleeping in crowded bunks below, and the contrast humbles you. The coldest night remains cold, but embroidered covers, perfumed candles, and woven tapestries make it bearable. Warmth in a medieval castle was layered: fabric, stone, human effort, and social rank. Sleeping as a noble meant enduring winter with style, even as frost crept silently along the walls. The solar is richer, softer, and more private than the dormitories of youth, yet one final touch eases slumber: the pillow. Medieval pillows were not mass-produced cushions but varied in size, material, and scent. Fragrance mattered. Herbal sachets sewn into linen or tucked beneath pillowcases offered comfort and protection. Household inventories list lavender, rosemary, chamomile, and sage, believed to calm the mind and purify the air. Imagine lowering your head after a day in armor, inhaling the grassy perfume of lavender. The contrast between battlefield stench and this gentle aroma must have felt heavenly. One 15th-century recipe mixes dried rose petals with bay leaves in a linen pouch slipped into a pillow, said to bring sweet dreams. Hops, later used in beer, were also used as pillow stuffing to induce drowsiness. Monks sometimes used hot pillows in infirmaries. Odd but resourceful. Archaeological evidence of pillowcases is rare, but manuscripts show embroidered cloth, sometimes bearing initials or religious symbols. Nobles displayed status even in sleep. A knight might rest on herbs while his pillowcase bore his family crest. Scholars debate how widespread herbal pillows were. Some suggest they were common, others that elaborate mixtures were reserved for the wealthy, while retainers used plain straw bolsters. As you imagine sinking into such a pillow, the air softens, carrying warmth and memories of summer fields. For a moment, the coldest night in the castle transforms into a dream of warmth. A humorous anecdote recalls a warrior complaining when servants forgot his pillow sachet, claiming he could not sleep without rosemary to ward off evil airs. It highlights how seriously people valued these comforts. The pillow is more than support. It is a charm, a talisman against illness, and a key to gentle dreams. Faith, routine, and practicality intertwined in the seemingly simple act of laying one's head to rest. Practicality was woven into daily life, even into something as simple as sleep, transforming it into a small ritual. Interestingly, many herbal sachets served a dual purpose. They were both fragrant and practical. Strong herbs like mint or wormwood helped repel lice and fleas. In a time when vermin were constant companions, a scented pillow offered both comfort and protection. Every breath you take tonight carries not only calm but also relief from these nuisances. Close your eyes and imagine it fully: the curtain-enclosed bed, the fire reduced to glowing embers, the wind moaning through distant corridors. At your head, delicate scents linger: lavender, rosemary, maybe a hint of rose. Fragile and fleeting, these aromas were enough to soften the harshness of stone and frost. The herbal pillow shows that even in a world of iron and hardship, people sought small comforts wherever possible. Beneath the weight of furs, beside the brazier's glow, under the watch of guards, there was still room for gentleness. Dried flowers sewn into linen breathed peace into the coldest nights, their lavender and rosemary aromas guiding sleepers toward rest. Yet sleep was never entirely free from interruption. From a distance, a sound rises, deep and resonant: the church bell. Its voice cuts through the night, echoing across fields, forests, and frozen moors, reaching every chamber of the castle. These bells measured time, and even in sleep, nights were shaped by their rhythm. Monastic influence placed bells at the center of medieval life, marking canonical hours such as matins and lauds. Lay people were not bound by the monk's strict schedule, but the sound of bells still shaped their nights. Imagine lying under firs as the bell tolls for midnight matins. Its vibrations seem to shake the stone itself. For some, it is a reminder to whisper prayers. For others, an unwelcome disruption, a reminder that the cold hours still stretch ahead. Chronicles note how far bells carried in winter: the air crisp and trees bare. The sound traveled far, bouncing across frozen landscapes. A knight might hear not only his chapel's bell but distant bells from villages miles away, layering the night with overlapping tones. The sound became a chorus, distant but insistent, reminding all that life continued beyond the castle walls. Bells were not only for prayer. They also served as alarms. A sudden, urgent peal could signal fire, attack, or danger. Imagine waking abruptly, heart racing, as a familiar rhythm turns urgent. Sleep-heavy bodies would lurch toward armor and weapons, the cold forgotten in panic. The same instrument that soothed could also summon one to battle. An unusual anecdote comes from an English manor. A guest complained that the bells rang so often that no hour of rest seemed granted by heaven. Whether exaggerated or true, it shows how disruptive bells could feel to the unaccustomed. Sleep was shaped by faith and duty rather than personal desire. Modern researchers debate the effect of bells on medieval life. Some argue that people were so accustomed to the sound they drifted back to sleep easily. Others suggest it created segmented sleep, waking and dozing in alignment with prayer times. The discussion continues, leaving us to imagine how nights were scored by these metallic notes. As you lie in your chamber, you can almost feel the bell vibrate in your chest, sliding through stone corridors, shuttered windows, and curtained beds. Inescapable yet oddly comforting, it anchors the night. Random creaks, cold drafts, and distant winds are unsettling, but the bell is steady and intentional, giving a sense of order and marking the passage of time. In a world without clocks, such knowledge mattered. People's reactions varied. Some nights grumbled, pulling blankets higher. Others rose to mutter psalms before collapsing back into sleep. A few, perhaps overly pious or anxious, remained awake all night, fearing missing a prayer might bring misfortune. Imagine your fellow knight nodding off while insisting he kept vigil, head bobbing like a rooster. There was also aesthetic pleasure. Picture the sound cutting through a still winter night. Each strike echoed across snowy fields, softened by the air. For a moment, the cold felt less hostile, darkness less endless. The bell reminded sleepers they were part of a larger rhythm, that others were awake, praying, moving with the night. Close your eyes and follow the sequence. Deep boom, silence, then another. The pauses are as important as the strikes. In those moments, your heartbeat slows, your breath steadies. The bell interrupts sleep, yet also guides you back into it. When silence returns, the chamber feels heavier, softer. You pull the furs up to your chin, letting the bell's lingering vibration settle into your bones. On the coldest nights, warmth alone was not enough. It was rhythm, sound, and the sense that time still moved even when stars were hidden. Drift again, half aware of the bell echoing across countryside, binding castle, village, and forest under a shared frozen sky. Yet another unease creeps in. Not the draft, the weight of pelts, or the wind, but the medieval fear of night air itself. Darkness was thought to harbor invisible dangers, carrying spirits or sickness. You draw blankets closer, shielding not only against cold but against superstition. Medical theory emphasized bad airs, or miasmas. Cold drafts were believed to bring disease, and sleeping in open air left one vulnerable. In households where coughs and fevers were common, the belief felt justified. Imagine lying in bed, hearing the wind through a shutter, worrying not only about discomfort, but about illness riding the invisible stream. Household regulations reflect this. Servants were instructed to block cracks with cloth at night, protecting warmth and health alike. In medieval times, people believed it was important to prevent night vapors from entering their sleeping spaces. Curtains around the bed were valued not only for retaining warmth but also for shielding sleepers from invisible dangers. Your bed, wrapped in fabric, served as both a fortress against drafts and a defense against imagined spirits. Surprisingly often, these fears intertwined with folklore. Tales told of night walkers, demons, or wandering spirits slipping through cracks or chimneys, smothering souls in their sleep. Servants would quietly secure curtains, each knot acting as a protective ward. A 14th-century chronicle recounts a curious incident. A knight, convinced that evil spirits caused his persistent cough, moved his bed from the outer wall to the center of the chamber, believing this would shield him from malevolent drafts. Whether it improved his health is unknown, but the image of dragging a bed across stone floors nightly is almost comical. Archaeological studies show that some castle chambers were rearranged seasonally, beds shifted, curtains adjusted, and fires moved. Scholars debate whether this was purely practical or influenced by superstition. Many argue that folklore significantly shaped domestic design. Lying in such a room tonight, it's easy to understand the fear. The wind moans through stone like a living presence, rattling shutters and brushing your skin. Though you might dismiss the idea of spirits, your body tenses, clutching the blanket. Darkness amplifies fear. people tried various remedies. Some kept garlic or onions nearby, believing strong scents repelled harmful air. Others burned herbs, filling rooms with smoke as protection. Imagine drifting to sleep with lavender and garlic competing in the air, unpleasant, perhaps, but comforting in a superstitious sense. The medieval bedroom was not just a place of rest, it was a fumigation chamber. As night deepens, your breath warms the air within your curtains. Outside, the wind carries fears of the age, but inside, you are shielded by furs, curtains, herbs, and prayers. Whether the dangers were real mattered little. The rituals themselves reassured the sleeper. Researchers note that such beliefs influence behavior during the day, avoiding open windows, covering mouths against drafts, or keeping amulets at bedside. Sleep was never casual. It was a negotiation with both visible and invisible forces. In a castle steeped in stone and superstition, every night was a careful truce. Close your eyes and sense it, the cold pressing at the curtains, the wind's breath on the wall, the soft crackle of smoldering herbs. You are safe, or at least believe you are, and that belief is enough. In the Middle Ages, faith and superstition worked together to protect the sleeper. Tonight they protect you. You drift toward dreams, comforted by tradition. Every tied curtain, whispered blessing, and herb pouch reinforces your safety. True or not, surrendering to illusion is sometimes essential for sleep. Sleep was shaped not only by superstition but also by the rhythms of castle life. Nights were rarely steady, rest ebbed and flowed with feasts, hunts, campaigns, and duties. Exhaustion from a cold night was often as much about the day's demands as the weather. Chronicles describe castles coming alive after sunset, fires roaring, goblets clinking, music swelling. Knights feasted heavily, then returned to their chambers, often too full to rest easily. Comfort was elusive, not from hunger, but from excess. Feasts sometimes pushed sleep past midnight, with late-night stories or games fragmenting rest. A chamber was often a brief stop between obligations, not a sanctuary. Hunts also disrupted sleep. Early mornings required rising in freezing dark, servants fumbling with torches. The excitement of the chase didn't eliminate the discomfort. Sleep was still truncated. Knights might nap midday in armor, then endure cold nights half awake, muscles still buzzing from the hunt. Campaigns disrupted sleep entirely. Letters and accounts note bursts of rest by a fire, against a shield, or sometimes none at all. Returning to a castle felt luxurious by comparison, even with drafty rooms and lumpy mattresses. Relief came from warmth and the thought, at least this isn't the battlefield. Historians debate whether segmented sleep was expected. Some suggest two phases were normal: sleep before midnight, wakefulness for prayer or reading, then a second sleep. Others argue such patterns were more typical in towns, as castle duties disrupted rhythms. The idea of first and second sleep remains a window into the flexible nature of medieval rest. A 15th-century anecdote illustrates this. One man, awake after a heavy feast, composed verses about the cold. Companions teased him for writing poetry under blankets, but he claimed the chill sharpened his mind. Picture him quill in hand, muttering about icy drafts while others groaned for quiet. As you lie in your chamber tonight, feel these rhythms around you. Perhaps yesterday was a feast, leaving your belly full. Perhaps tomorrow brings a hunt, requiring early rising. Or perhaps war looms, fragmenting your rest. Sleep in the Middle Ages was shaped by superstition, routine, and circumstance. Every draft, every ritual, every tradition worked together to guard the sleeper. Interrupted sleep already clouds your dreams. In a castle, rest is never entirely your own. It bends to the life of the household. The contrast with peasants outside the walls is striking. Their lives, though harsh, may have allowed steadier sleep. They rose with the sun, went to bed at dusk, and rarely heard bells at night. Privilege, in contrast, often brought more disruption. Your chamber reflects that reality. Curtains, furs, and scented pillows offer comfort, yet your body still carries the day's feasting, hunting, and duties. Even here, you turn restlessly under the covers, memory and expectation tugging at you. The cold is only part of the struggle. Life's irregular rhythm shapes sleep far more deeply. Close your eyes and drift with that cadence. Laughter from the hall still echoes, hounds bark in imagination, and tension from campaigns lingers, ready to call you from bed at any moment. Sleep is broken, intermittent, yet arrives, guided by exhaustion, noise, and ritual. Medieval sleep was not continuous but a patchwork, disrupted by bells, feasts, and duty, softened by ritual, yet enough to carry you to dawn. Tonight, as you sink into your cocoon of warmth, you surrender not to perfect sleep but to the uneven, fragile rest of the era. Dreams flutter in fragments, carried by bells and feasts, interrupted by a cough somewhere nearby. In a castle, such a cough was more than a minor annoyance, it was a warning. Cold nights carried sickness, lingering unseen, striking when bodies were weakest. Wrapped in furs, warmth becomes survival, not mere comfort. Medieval medical texts describe winter humors. Cold and damp could disrupt the body, causing fever, chills, or lingering coughs. Knights might face swords by day, but at night, illness was the real enemy. Chroniclers often described castles in winter as echoing with coughs, as if the walls themselves were sick. Fires offered warmth but brought smoke, drafts, and damp air that irritated throats and lungs. Imagine lying under pelts, eyes stinging, chest tightening, unsure if a cough across the room signals smoke or illness. Remedies were sometimes unusual. Herbal teas from thyme, honey, or hyssop were common. Onions were placed near beds to absorb harmful vapors. Charms blessed by priests offered divine protection. Picture drifting to sleep with a raw onion on the nightstand and a saint's medal. Under the pillow, strange, but precaution mattered more than reason. One anecdote survives from a 14th century castle. A knight, convinced he had a deadly chill, ordered every blanket piled on him. He could barely move, yet the next morning, drenched in sweat, he declared himself cured and earned the nickname, the Bundle Knight. Whether coincidence or fever broken, he triumphed over winter in the eyes of his household. Scholars debate the role of cold in illness. Damp castles, poor ventilation, close quarters, and unwashed bedding may have spread disease more than temperature itself. Others note that constant exposure to cold weakened immunity. Either way, fear was real. Every night sneeze or cough stirred unease. You can hear it even now, faint echoes down corridors, piercing silence sharper than wind. You pull the pelts tighter, trusting herbs, prayers, and layers, yet unease remains. Sleep feels dangerous when sickness prowls just beyond the curtains. Even alcohol was treated as medicine against winter ills. Warm, spiced wine or ale was believed to drive out cold humors. Knights drank before bed, believing drunken warmth offered protection. Slurred prayers and loud snores accompanied a sense of security. Comfort often mattered more than cure. The castle resonated with these nightly struggles. Servants delivered broth to fevered retainers. Nobles whispered prayers over sick children. Death from chills, pneumonia, or plague was never far away. Sleep was not mere rest, it was a gamble. Each night survived felt like victory. Close your eyes and lean into that thought. The cold presses, coughs continue, yet you breathe deeply, trusting layers of fabric, fire, and prayer. Perhaps the sleeper beside you snores rather than coughs. Perhaps dawn will bring frost, not fever. That fragile hope offers comfort. For medieval sleepers, winter nights always carried a shadow of illness, yet faith, ritual, and endurance kept them pressing on. Tonight, you too, surrender to that uneasy truce, drifting into slumber while sickness lurks at the edges of dreams. The memory of coughs fades as your mind wanders beyond the frozen walls. You imagine heat, light, and distant lands. In northern fortresses, coldest nights inspired dreams of crusades and deserts where sun burned fiercely and frost felt impossible. Contemporary chronicles show that men who marched in the Levant often remembered nights under star-filled skies, cloaked lightly, dreaming of warmth back in Europe. Picture lying in your curtained bed, frost on shutters, yet tasting dates, smelling spices, feeling the blaze of desert noon. Cold makes you crave the opposite. And in sleep, the body often grants that longing. One well-documented account tells of a crusader returning to Burgundy, who claimed he could never feel warmth again. He recounted baking in armor under the Jerusalem sun until his skin blistered, yet back home, no fire seemed to penetrate his bones. Whether true or exaggerated, the story illustrates a paradox. Extreme experiences left lasting marks, even reshaping how one slept. Surprisingly, these dreams were not always comforting. Some nights brought nightmares, visions of endless marches under scorching suns, the hum of flies, the cries of the wounded. To awaken in a freezing chamber with sweat on the brow was disorienting. The body chilled while the mind remained trapped in heat. The contrast between waking and dreaming made the night feel uncanny, as though time and space twisted together in darkness. A 13th-century chronicle recounts a winter night when a man cried out in his sleep for water, startling his companions. Awakened, he laughed bitterly, saying he had been back in the desert. Picture him, fur piled on his chest, frost at the window, yet his mind still burned. Archaeological evidence hints at these mental journeys. Inscriptions on castle walls left by returning crusaders include references to the Holy Land, carved crosses or names of distant places, suggesting their minds remained elsewhere even at home. One can almost see a weary man scratching acre into stone before crawling beneath pelts, as if naming it might carry him back into dreams of warmth. Scholars debate whether such recurring dreams reflected trauma, longing, or simple contrast. Some see them as early psychological scars, what we now call haunting memories of war. Others argue they were cultural expressions, stories emphasizing the prestige of crusaders. Whatever the truth, these dreams must have felt vivid and strange, slipping between heat and frost as sleep pulled the mind in unexpected directions. As you lie in your chamber now, distant images tug at your mind. The crackling fire becomes a desert sun. The scent of lavender in your pillow transforms into spice and myrrh. The howling wind outside the shutters turns into the murmur of foreign markets. For a moment, you are both here and there, frozen body, wandering mind. Interestingly, even those who never left home reported such dreams. Tales spread through castles, and squires who had never seen a palm tree still imagined warm crusader nights. Their minds borrowed stories from older nights, stitching together deserts and cities from hearsay. In dreams, experience became contagious. You turn beneath your blankets, caught between two worlds. Outside, frost grips the moat. Guards stamp their feet. Shutters rattle. But inside your mind, you ride across endless dunes, sand shifting beneath your horse's hooves. You feel the heat, hear the distant call to prayer, smell the Mediterranean salt. Dreams deliver what waking life denies: warmth, light, escape. When you awaken, breath clouding in the cold air, the irony is clear. Even in castles built to withstand armies, knights fled not in body, but in mind. The coldest winters drove dreams of deserts, trading frost for fire, if only for hours. Close your eyes again. The pelts are heavy, the air sharp, but thoughts wander towards sun and sand. Perhaps this is the gift of winter. It makes every dream of warmth sweeter, every memory of heat more precious. Sleep carries you beyond the castle walls, if only until dawn. The desert fades, and slowly you drift back to stone walls and frost. Your mind steadies, aware of another presence outside the chamber, the moat. By day, it is a defense. By night, winter transforms it into a mirror of ice, faintly gleaming under the moon. Even in sleep, you imagine its surface frozen solid, the castle encircled not by water but by a silent sheet of glass. Chroniclers often describe winter transforming moats, ponds, and wells into still mirrors, reflecting stars like silver. The sight must have been uncanny. The familiar fortress suddenly encircled by a silent white plain. From your bed, you can picture it: the frozen moat, the drawbridge creaking against frost, guards peering down at their reflections. One well-attested detail is that frozen moats could threaten security. Ice created a bridge for enemies, turning water defenses into mere decoration. There are accounts of raids across ice where boats once floundered. Imagine lying awake, aware that your home's shield has become a potential danger. Cold chilled and changed the rules of defense. Frozen moats also altered the castle's soundscape. Where water once lapped gently, frost brought silence, broken only by cracking ice. Sudden booming echoes startled residents awake, unsure whether ice was breaking or walls were under attack. A 14th-century siege report describes defenders pouring hot water on ice to weaken it, creating mist in freezing air, a ghostly sight. Servants carried buckets in the dark, the moat hissing as hot and cold collided. Sleep was impossible. Survival demanded vigilance. Archaeological studies confirm repeated freeze-thaw cycles near rivers. Icy moats were seasonal certainties. Residents knew that each winter, their watery guardian could turn traitor. Sleep wrapped in furs was shadowed by this awareness. Scholars debate how residents adapted psychologically. Some argue frozen moats increased anxiety, others say ice became part of seasonal rhythm, like drafts or coughs. The uncertainty leaves room for imagination. Lying in your chamber, you might dread the ice or marvel at its beauty. And there was beauty. On clear nights, moonlight on ice glittered like crystal. Stars mirrored beneath walls created an eerie, enchanting scene. From your bed, if curtains parted, faint silver lights softened the darkness. The same ice that threatened also dazzled. Cold was cruel, but it could also captivate. You might find it amusing to imagine boys sneaking out to slide across a frozen moat. Chronicles hint at such antics, often recording reprimands for reckless squires. Picture their laughter echoing through the night, boots skidding over slick ice, while their masters shivered in bed above, cursing the draft. Mischief thrived even in frost. As you lie back, your mind drifts toward that frozen circle outside. The moat lies silent, horses in their stalls still, the world frozen beneath the ice. Inside, you are swaddled in layers. Outside, the earth is locked in glass. The contrast is striking, your warmth, however fragile, against the perfection of frozen water. Close your eyes and sense the strangeness. A castle is meant to be eternal, unchanging, yet each season reshapes it. In winter, the moat becomes mirror, not barrier, but bridge. Your sleep is not isolated from this change. It flows into your dreams, mixing unease with wonder. You drift again, half imagining the crack of shifting ice, half enchanted by moonlight on the frozen moat. Silence encircles the castle, drawing you toward rest. But within that silence, another sound rises, a chorus of human voices. From the great hall below, songs drift upward, softened by distance but still reaching your chamber. Feasting may have ended, yet merriment often continued late into the night, even in the coldest weather. Music and stories offered warmth no fire could provide. Contemporary accounts describe minstrels entertaining the household after supper, plucking lutes, strumming harps, or blowing pipes, while singers told tales of heroes and saints. These performances were not mere diversion, they were instruction, reminders of courage, loyalty, and virtue. Imagine lying beneath your pelts, half asleep, while a ballad of Charlemagne threads its way through stone corridors. The castle itself becomes an instrument, carrying notes across floors and chambers. Records frequently note that song and storytelling often lasted deep into the night. Guests sprawled on benches, servants dozed against walls, and lords demanded encore after encore. Wine fueled both performers and listeners. By the time the hall emptied, midnight bells might toll. Those rising early for hunts or watches grumbled, while others cherished the rare escape from winter gloom. Surprisingly, much of this sound seeped into private chambers. Stone walls amplified echoes, and even curtained beds could not block the muffled rhythm of drum or chant. Sleep was shaped not only by drafts but by entertainment. You might dream of battles not because you fought them, but because a minstrel sang of them shortly before you closed your eyes. One northern chronicle offers an unusual anecdote. A man complained that a bard's endless verses about Alexander the Great kept him awake for 3 nights. He begged his lord to silence the bard, only to be mocked for lacking stamina. Picture him tossing beneath his blankets, groaning at each new stanza, muttering that he'd rather face frost than poetry. Archaeological finds give us glimpses of the instruments themselves, fragments of harps, whistles carved from bone, drums with stretched hide. Their tones must have been raw, piercing through smoky air. Imagine the vibration of a drum thudding in your chest as you try to sleep, or the plaintive song of a flute weaving into half-dreams. Scholars still debate whether music at night soothed or disturbed rest. Some argue it comforted households like lullabies for children. Others believe it fractured sleep, keeping bodies restless long after fires burned low. Perhaps both are true. For some, song was comfort. For others, torture. Tonight, in your chamber, faint strains feel more calming than disruptive. A reminder that warmth exists beyond your pelts, carried in human voice. Knights themselves sometimes joined in, despite the stiffness of their armor and serious reputations. Imagine a burly, red-nosed man, cracked voice off-key, leaning into song as companions cheer. Such moments broke the severity of life, proving even warriors needed music to survive long winters. As you roll under your covers, the muffled notes fade, merging with the rhythm of your heartbeat and the crack of embers. Voices dissolve into the wind, yet in that merging you sense something profound. The castle is alive with sound, and even in your private chamber, you are part of its collective heartbeat. Close your eyes and let the echoes wash over you. The frozen moat may threaten, drafts may bite, yet tonight the fortress hums with stories. You sleep not in silence, but within a choir of memory, songs of saints, heroes, and fools, filling the void of winter. Softened by distance, this music carries you toward deeper slumber, proving even the coldest night can be warmed by voices that refuse to fall silent. Eventually, the songs fade, replaced by quieter sounds, night footsteps retreating, benches scraping, torches hissing low. Yet not all in the castle enjoy sleep. Above you, faint thuds and rustles reveal figures keeping watch against fire. On the coldest nights, when hearths and braziers blaze hottest, flames threaten timber and rushes. Fire sustains life, but it can destroy it. Historical ordinances detail explicit roles. Servants called watchmen patrolled halls after others retired, tasked to stir embers without letting them flare. A single spark on dry rushes could transform a chamber into an inferno. Imagine tired eyes scanning floors, hands clutching sand buckets, ears pricked for faint crackles. While you curl under pelts, they wage a quiet battle against disaster. Many castles banned open flames in private rooms without supervision. Candles were precious but risky. Residents often snuffed them before closing curtains, leaving only the glow of a guarded brazier. Lying in near darkness, you sense the orange shimmer of coals, knowing that a single lapse could awaken you to smoke. Fires still broke out despite precautions. Chronicles describe great halls gutted, roofs collapsing in sparks, entire fortresses ruined. Survivors recall waking to shouts and choking fumes, stumbling through smoke-filled corridors. Sleeping in a castle carried latent anxiety, safe from swords, yet not from fire. One curious anecdote from the 15th century tells of a half-drunk knight who, after a feast, accidentally kicked over a candle. He fumbled toward his bed as his chamber nearly caught fire, saved only by quick thinking. Servants who doused the rushes. The next day he swore never to drink after dusk again, though, predictably, he broke that vow within the week. Stories like this remind us how thin the line between comfort and disaster truly was. Archaeological studies of charred beams in castle ruins confirm this constant danger. Even stone fortresses relied on wooden floors, ceilings, and roofs. Fire was both a source of warmth and a looming threat. To lie under heavy covers, aware that servants padded the halls with water, was to accept that rest came at the cost of vigilance. Scholars debate how common dedicated fire watchers were. Some suggest only the wealthiest castles employed them nightly, while smaller households relied on sleepy squires or overworked servants to monitor embers. Others argue such precautions were universal because the risk was too high to ignore. The debate continues, but one thing is clear: the fear of fire shaped how people slept. As you lie beneath your pelts, you can imagine those unseen figures moving softly outside your chamber, the faint scrape of a poker against logs, boots shuffling on rushes, and the low murmur of a servant scolding himself awake. Their presence is invisible yet essential. Your sleep depends on their alertness. Interestingly, some households used bells not only for prayers but also as fire alarms. A small handbell rung in corridors could rouse drowsy watchmen or wake nodding squires. Picture the absurdity. A servant creeping through stone passages, ringing a bell softly just to ensure another servant stayed awake beside the brazier. Even discipline could carry a comic edge. Close your eyes and sense the tension. Warmth cradles you, yet fear hums faintly. The brazier glows, fire watchers pace, and the castle breathes with cautious vigilance. Sleep is possible only because others remain half awake, scanning for sparks. On the coldest nights, when fires burned brightest, safety rested not just in walls or weapons, but in servants guarding your slumber from the very element meant to save you. The quiet tread of the firewatch fades, leaving only the faint glow of embers. You sigh into your furs, feeling warmth close about you, but another truth lingers. Not every bed in the castle was equal. As you rest in your curtained cocoon, others lie on pallets, benches, or bare floors. Hierarchy did not vanish at night. It shaped every layer of rest, dividing warmth from cold, softness from hardness. Documents from noble households list bedding among prized possessions: feather mattresses, wool blankets, fur covers. Luxury cascaded downward in rank. Lords claimed goose down, knights settled for wool or straw, and servants made do with straw sacks. Imagine the contrast, you under embroidered covers, while a stable boy sleeps nearby on hay that crackles with every shift. The castle united all under one roof, yet sleep was layered, like the feasts in the great hall. Feather mattresses were so valuable they appeared in wills. Inheriting a bed symbolized comfort as much as wealth. A noble lady might pass her best bed to a daughter, ensuring nights wrapped in softness, while a servant inherited only a worn cloak to fold into makeshift bedding on cold stone. Even bed placement marked hierarchy. Nobles slept in solars or upper chambers, closer to rising heat, while servants and guards were consigned to damp, colder floors. To lie beneath pelts on an upper floor was to feel warmth multiplied by privilege, while down below someone's breath fogged in the freezing dark. A curious 15th century anecdote describes a knight finding his page under his covers seeking warmth. Rather than punishing him, the knight laughed, remarking that rank matters less than frost. Such stories were rare, but they show that cold nights could occasionally bend strict order. Archaeological digs reveal straw bedding tucked in corners far from hearths, where servants slept out of sight, enduring scratchy rest and fleas. Comparing this to your curtained bed exposes the sharp divide of medieval life. Some endured winter with dignity, others with mere stubbornness. Scholars debate whether knights often endured straw mattresses or whether furs made their nights bearable. The truth likely varied with wealth and circumstance. You lie still, imagining the many sleepers scattered throughout the fortress. In solars, lords breathe softly under feather and fur. Knights curl against drafts, hoping pelts suffice. Servants shiver on straw, cloaks pulled to their noses. All sleep beneath the same roof, yet each experience differs by station. Even dreams reflected hierarchy. Noble dream books interpreted visions of crowns or jewels as omens, while servants' dreams of food were dismissed as hunger. The knight reaffirmed rank subtly. To be cold on straw meant dreaming of bread, to be warm on feather meant dreaming of glory. Yet when frost was sharp, lines sometimes blurred. A restless lord might envy squires packed together like puppies. An exhausted servant might envy the stillness of a curtained cocoon. Sleep revealed desires that rank could not fully control. Close your eyes again and picture the castle as a hive of sleepers. Each chamber glows faintly with ember or candle. Each bed a world of its own. Above, below, side by side, people breathe into the same winter air, bound together by walls yet separated by wealth. Privileged in your pelts, curtains, and scented pillows, you cannot help but think of those below as you sink deeper into rest. Medieval sleep was not just about warmth or cold, but about inequality. The harshest nights made the differences sharper. Some suffered, some endured, some indulged. Tonight, you feel both gratitude and guilt as you surrender to slumber, aware that others under the same roof will wake with aching bones and frozen fingers. The castle breathes around you, some curled in feather beds. Others shivered on straw, yet even among nights, nighttime experiences were not uniform. Your own rest, wrapped in furs and scented linens, depended not only on rank but also on your identity as a man, a warrior. Meanwhile, in the adjacent chamber, a lady of the household prepared for sleep according to her own rhythms. Gender shaped nightly routines just as much as social standing. Contemporary sources highlight differences in how men and women endured the coldest nights. Noble women often had solars, private chambers draped with fine fabrics and attended by servants. Their beds featured embroidered covers, delicate linens, and strong perfume sachets, far more elaborate than a knight's accommodations. Yet, luxury brought restrictions. Women were rarely left alone. Servants or companions often shared chambers, both for warmth and propriety. Trying to sleep while a maid rustled in the corner, always observing, was part of the nightly reality. Childbirth, illness, and nursing further shaped women's sleep. A lady might rise to care for children or remain half awake, listening for their cries. Inventories show cradles alongside beds, indicating that nurseries were often part of the bedroom rather than separate. While a knight fretted over drafts and armor, a woman worried for the tiny, fragile bodies beside her. Some noble women burned night lamps more frequently than men, leaving chambers faintly lit. This was not just for comfort. Flames kept away vermin, soothed children, and reassured attendants, though they also increased fire risk, a paradox accepted for peace of mind. Imagine a lady beneath her silks, watching a lamp flicker against a tapestry as frost crept outside. A 15th-century anecdote tells of a noblewoman who ordered her servants to warm not only her bed but also her small lapdog's cushion, insisting it needed protection from drafts. The image is tender, a pampered dog snoozing while peasants outside struggled through frost. Sleep thus became a stage of privilege and care. Archaeological studies of textile fragments show that women's bedding was more varied. Silk, velvet, and dyed wool appear disproportionately in female chambers, while men's rooms relied more on plain wool or leather. Even in sleep, identity was expressed, station, gender, and dignity woven into every coverlet. Scholars debate how comfortable women truly were. Some argue that carefully arranged solars allowed better rest. Others counter that constant obligations, childcare, household management, and religious duties made nights shorter and more restless. Comfort in fabric did not always equal comfort of body. Castles divided themselves by experience. In your chamber, rosemary mingled with smoke. In hers, rose water softened the cold. Your concerns were drafts, armor, and crusades. Hers were children, propriety, and household order. Both lay awake at times, listening to wind batter shutters, sharing the same cold but shaped by different roles. Some women wrote about husbands' nocturnal antics, snoring so loudly curtains shook or stealing covers. Letters survive as glimpses of domestic humor, showing that even in rigid hierarchies, nighttime remained human, filled with minor quarrels beneath embroidered sheets. Knights rose at dawn for hunts or battles. Women rose for children, prayers, and endless duties. Both sought warmth in pelts and herbs, but each dreamt differently. Medieval nights were divided by gender and rank, yet linked by frost and the need for rest. The cold cared for no social distinctions, but how people mitigated it revealed their place in the castle. Castles were alive with sound. Beyond wind and footsteps, animals filled the night. Horses stamped in stables, dogs barked or growled, chickens rustled, and pigs grunted. The great hall often doubled as a kennel, and stables were placed near walls so horses' warmth radiated into chambers. Cats prowled freely, hunting mice. Lying beneath pelts, one heard neighs, barks, and scratches, an unusual lullaby. Dogs shared close quarters with knights, often curling at the foot of beds. They offered warmth, companionship, and protection, alerting masters to intruders or fire. Falcons, kept indoors for training, sometimes perched beside beds, their feathers rustling in the dark, a mark of status. A 14th-century French account describes a knight who insisted on stabling a prized stallion directly beneath his solar, claiming better sleep from hearing it breathe. Guests complained, but he refused to change, highlighting the bond between knights and animals. Archaeological evidence supports this, showing stables directly under or near residential quarters. In winter, warmth from animals was a benefit, though odors could be unpleasant. To lie above a stable was to experience both comfort and discomfort, the heat of beasts countering the frost, the smell testing endurance. Medieval nights were thus defined by dualities: privilege and duty, warmth and cold, silence and the ever-present hum of life around you. A strange mix of comfort and unease filled castle chambers. Scholars still debate how disruptive animals were at night. Some argue they provided warmth, security, and familiarity. Others insist they disturbed sleep with noise and odor. Likely, the truth depended on habit. What would feel unbearable today became normal, even reassuring for castle dwellers. As you lie in your chamber tonight, you can almost sense them. The thud of a hoof, the clatter of a kennel chain, the flutter of a restless falcon's wings. These sounds mingle with the crackle of fire and the whisper of the wind, forming part of the night's rhythm. You are never alone, not just because of guards and servants, but because animals share the fortress with you. It may amuse you to imagine fleas and lice moving freely between beasts and humans. Dogs in beds offered warmth, yes, but also brought vermin. Chronicles sometimes mention scratching under furs, cursing the hounds, yet refusing to banish them. Sleep was never entirely pure. It carried the company of creatures, large and small. Close your eyes again and picture it. Outside, horses shift in stalls, steam rising into the cold air. Inside, dogs snore near the fire, their paws twitching in dreams of the hunt. A falcon tilts its head as if listening to the wind. All are part of the nightly rhythm, tied to the castle as much as you are. On the coldest nights, survival was shared, knight and hound, squire and horse, lady and falcon. The castle was never only stone and humans. It was a living ark, sheltering every heartbeat through the frost. The castle feels alive around you. Dogs snore, horses shift, servants shuffle in corridors, guards stamp on the battlements. And yet, as you sink deeper into furs, you sense that everything, the curtains, herbs, rushes, fire, even the animals, exists with one goal: surviving until morning. Medieval sleep was never easy. It was warmth borrowed from cold, order carved from discomfort, ritual fashioned like armor against the long night. Records show the attention given to these fragile hours. Household inventories listed bedding alongside weapons, proving a good night's sleep mattered as much as a sharp sword. A knight who shivered all night would not fight well by day. Every servant's task, every whispered prayer, every scattered herb was part of a system of survival. Imagine the household as a machine, each gear turning so that you, wrapped in pelts, might awaken at dawn. Mornings often revealed frost clinging to bed curtains, even blankets. The air was so cold your breath crystallized. Waking under such conditions was a reminder that nighttime comfort was temporary, a fragile bubble. Picture pushing aside heavy curtains, seeing your own breath hanging white, your skin prickled despite furs. Sleep had been reprieve, not victory. Some castles developed small rituals to celebrate surviving the coldest nights. Chronicles record lords rewarding servants with extra ale or bread if fires were kept. One account mentions retainers singing a morning cheer after bitter nights. Relief became ritualized gratitude, a communal recognition that the household had endured together. A 14th-century manuscript tells of a nobleman who claimed he slept best on the coldest nights, saying that warmth was most valued when death pressed against the wall. His words highlight how winter's extremity sharpened appreciation for every layer of fur, every spark of fire, every human or animal body close by. Comfort was born of contrast. Without frost, furs and fires would mean little. Archaeological evidence supports these adaptations. Soot marks reveal where braziers burned year after year. Floor grooves show where beds were moved seasonally for warmth. Faint textile imprints hint at furs and curtains. These traces show not only how people lived, but how they slept, the struggle against cold etched into castle bones. Scholars debate whether these measures actually ensured restful sleep. Some argue the noise, drafts, and animals kept people perpetually weary. Others suggest exhaustion from work, training, or feasting guaranteed sleep. Likely, the truth is simple. Rest was imperfect, yet sufficient. The body adapts, the mind adjusts, and even discomfort could yield dreams. As you lie in your chamber now, you sense this. Layers are imperfect. Drafts creep through shutters. The brazier smokes faintly. A dog scratches at fleas. The bell will ring before dawn. Yet your breath slows. Your body loosens. Sleep comes. Survival isn't perfection, it is acceptance. Modern sleepers might never endure a night with frost on beds or fleas in furs. Yet here you drift, finding strange satisfaction. Hardship has become normal, and normal has become comfort. Close your eyes once more. Curtains hang heavy, muting drafts. The herbal pillow releases scent. Pelts press weighty but protective. Outside, guards pace and animals stir. The castle holds you, imperfect but steadfast. You surrender, knowing dawn will come with frost and duties. The coldest nights teach a lesson. Medieval sleep was never simple or guaranteed, but always precious. Every layer, every prayer, every servant's step mattered. Rest was a communal achievement. To sleep was to survive, and survival was victory enough. Now the story slows as does your breath. You have wandered corridors, lain among furs and herbs, felt frost press at shutters, heard bells and dogs. The castle has shared its night with you. Let your body loosen as if shedding armor. Pelts grow softer, pressing you deeper. Drafts fade to whispers. The castle breathes around you, but you are at rest, cocooned. Air stills, the fire dims to embers. Sounds melt into quiet. Even the cold recedes, replaced by warmth rising from within. Breath drifts slow, even rhythmic. With each exhale, release the day. With each inhale, sink deeper into calm. Imagine the frozen moat under moonlight, softened into mist. The wind becomes a sigh, the castle fades into dream. You are safe. Carried by centuries of slumbers, knights, squires, ladies, servants, surrendering to sleep. Rest easy. The story has ended. The night is yours. Drift deeper, letting the coldest castle night dissolve into your warmest dream.